Hello, and welcome to another episode of Tech Time Today. I am your host, Jeff Whelpley, and with me, I have a returning guest who was on with me a couple months ago when we were at Google I/O. A great episode. I would definitely urge you to watch that episode, and I'll put a link in the comments. But this is Chris Esplin, the man, the myth, the legend. How are you doing, Chris?
Doing great. Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Come back for seconds, talk more about programming.
Yes. And these days, when we talk about programming, pretty much any topic, we're going to talk about AI. But before we even start on the topics, FYI, check out the shout out old school Firebase I got on my shirt, right?
Yes.
Like you're a Firebase guy.
I appreciate the old logo. I've got some of those in storage right now. I need to bust out at some point.
Oh yeah, classics, man. You could probably sell them on the black market or something like that.
Yeah. The logos are all like crinkly because they're 12 years old.
Yeah, I got that over here. Yeah.
Okay, so for me, context engineering it's all the things I add to the context from my file system. That can be markdown files. So if I'm stuck on something, I will make a markdown file specifically for the bug. Fill it up with all the information I know, all the data samples I've got, everything. And then I add that to the context of the question. And then prompt engineering is the question, right? It's just being detailed about the question.
Yeah, I feel like one thing that's important to understand that actually I don't think everybody necessarily does. There's probably like a lot of developers who use these AI tools that don't understand that they don't actually have memory. And that's the key part with understanding how to do good context engineering. Because yes, it seems like they do when you have a session and you're kind of talking to them. When you create a new session, that's gone. Yeah. And the reason is because it's a stateless machine. It's the AI, the LLM is responding to based off of what it's been trained on. But the stuff you're talking about, all that it does behind the scenes, they are just tracking your chat, and every time you post, they're sticking the entire history of your chat along with the next thing that you're entering, and that's how it knows. It has some semblance of like memory, but there's not really memory, right? So really, it's all about context.
Yeah, you got to maintain the context, which in my case, it just turns into a lot of text files. So markdown files or .copilot instructions files or whatever. And like if I have a markdown file that's for a bug, when the bug's solved, I'll delete it. But the other thing is you can have, when it solves the bug, you can have it update the markdown file with the bug description, the solution and everything. You can do the same thing for the markdown file that's like more permanent for that. So I'll put it in the directory right next to the messy, difficult code. I'll put a description in. So it's like comments, like, we used to add comments to code. Now we add markdown files to code. And you get that, when you get enough data, like data samples, data structures and everything in those markdown files, I just dump JSON in there, whatever, product requirements, then it gets really smart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, okay. Prompt engineering is just talking about in an individual isolated prompt of what you are talking to the AI about and what you're actually typing in for in the moment to try to achieve an objective. And we'll talk about in a second the best practices for that. Context engineering is, in a larger sense, it's not what you're typing in each time. It's like you suggested, put what you put in these context files, as well as a couple other things that are sort of just added to the prompt underneath the scenes with what you post. So you might be like a new session where you're saying, okay, I want to achieve objective X. And that goes to the LLM. But in addition to that goes all the other context that you want, right?
Yep. Like I use Copilot. So I have a .copilot instructions file in all my projects that it gets sent every time. And that tells it how I like to write code. I write a lot of JavaScript. JavaScript can be written any which way. And I find a lot of them really ugly. And so I'm very specific. And when it does something I hate, I ask it, hey, how, I make the correction and say, how would, what, please add this correction, the details of this correction to my style guide. And it will add them to my Copilot instructions file in the way that it understands. And I can make any edits. And then from there on out, it knows, for example, not to use named arrow functions unless necessary. Okay, so it depends on the size of what you're doing, but a lot of times, let's say you're doing a feature. You need to research that feature and know in detail what that feature needs to be, which is what you do anyway if you're programming yourself, right? So before you write any code, you have to understand what the data models look like, get samples of the data. So I put those samples in a markdown file, and I create sort of this dossier of everything you'd want to know about this feature. And the nice thing about it is by doing that, I've done all the legwork, and I kind of know what it should look like now. Like I've solved a lot of my problems. I probably should have been doing this for years. You know, add everything to context that you know, write a file of everything you know. And it takes 10, 20, 30 minutes sometimes to get that file set up. Once you do that, you can write problem statements, propose solutions. You basically write a full like technical requirements document for the thing as much as you can. You add that to the context. Then you also add the folders that are going to be relevant to the context. Now, Claude can interrogate your whole system, so it can do whatever it wants, but you want to prompt it. And then your prompt doesn't have to be that big. But the key is you want the prompt, that one prompt you write, to have all the information it will need to solve the problem. Because then it can comprehensively iterate for the next 10 minutes if it needs to, and it can solve the whole problem.
Yep.
And I've had it just one shot, smaller features. I mean, and then I'll break bigger features. I break them up, right? Like I'm only going to do I'm going to do one big chunk of it as much as I can bear to research and put into a file in a half hour.
Well, I think the key thing that I heard you say, which I completely agree with, is especially for bigger features, is creating a design doc. And like part of that is getting into the mentality of how you treat these LLM tools, that instead of thinking of it like Google search, like a more advanced Google search that you're looking up information or like you're asking it to do something simple, it's it's your junior developer,
Yeah.
right? And you have, the more specific and clear and precise you can be, the more effective the outcome is going to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
You
the
really don't want it. You don't want the AI to be making assumptions.
mm-hmm.
Like you want you want everything to be so well specced out that you could hand it to so the most junior guy ever who happens to know JavaScript really well, like perfectly. And that guy could execute it. Like it has to be so well specced.
So actually, in your design doc, one of the things I've seen people do that works really well is have examples.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so you explain what the code is, as in much detail, like you're saying this feature and this feature, and use and the exact way you want to do it with using Angular and or these
Yeah.
files, or whatever technologies. But then critically, like, okay, for example, like this, and this. And actually, the really key thing where you see, especially like Claude Code or Gemini CLI really excel, is if you can teach it within that context how to test that it did the right thing. Also, you can say like, okay, create the kind of to-do list and let's go one step at a time
Yes.
instead of doing it all once. Like, I guess there are some people who are just like, no, forget that. I'm just gonna have them do everything and then I'll check it later. But at least for me, I found it easier just to, like, even after we all agree on this is the plan, it's like, okay, implement this first thing and then let me check it out, and then the second thing, and
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah. I did a small project with Firebase Studio, formerly Project IDX, because it's like this now. It's like this crazy sort of vibe coding platform that gives you. I mean, you can code on it too, but you can vibe code on it really well. And one of the things they did is it always does a requirements document and a step-by-step to-do list.
Hmm.
Whenever you ask it a question, it's like, oh, generating the to-do list. It generates the to-do list and gives you edit access to it. And you go in and you edit it. And then the great thing is when it does the to-do list, that shows you all the mistakes you made in your context and your prompt. because all the stuff
Yes.
it missed. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
it's wrong there. Oh, it's wrong there. And you go and correct it. And once the to-do list is perfect, well, then it's going to work. So I'm a little old school. I still feel like you own every line. Like even if the AI wrote it, I still have to own it. It's got to be mine. And if it misbehaves, that's on me. So I still feel like code reviews are important. I
Mm-hmm.
still feel like okay, I'm doing the first code review of the AI's code before I send it. I'm making any edits. I'm asking it to clean up stuff that's complicated. I'm just doing some of the cleanup myself. And then then you still need the code review. You still basically need to follow the same patterns you've always followed to defend the quality of the code base.
Yeah, and the terminology I've heard for one of the things you talked about is human in the loop, or some people do
Yeah.
the abbreviation HITL or whatever, as opposed to true agentic development. True agentic development is the one shot where it's a black box, like the end result, and
Yeah.
you're just set the parameters and you clearly define what you want to develop from a user's point of view, but you're like, okay, whatever the code is. I do think maybe at some point in the future that will be possible, maybe.
Yeah.
But I think you and I are both on the same page that right now, no, like the team has to like understand what the code is, whether it's AI generating it or not, right?
Yeah, I mean, unless you don't care about it. So, for example, I had to
Mm,
write a script to suck a whole bunch of data out of this third party's API and jam it into my database. And I'm looking at this going, oh, this is going to take me like a day or two. This is miserable. So I gave it a whole bunch of data samples and I had it just start hitting Claude started hitting the API, pulling data samples. So I did the initial setup and it built me this huge .js file that did the whole thing. And I didn't read it because it was massive and it was a ton of data transformations. But I had a clear input and I had a clear output, and it worked. So we were good. And I could double check that it worked, and I double checked that it worked, and it was good. And I used that for a few days and then deleted it because I don't need it anymore.
but I do think it. There's probably very hard for any of us, even the most optimistic of us, to understand how good and how quickly some of these tools are going to advance, especially when it comes to coding. So, like, it's probably a whole other question how to what degree AI is going to be able to solve other problems in the world. That's a whole again. We could have a whole
Yeah.
other podcast on that type of thing. But in terms of like how good AI gets at coding, that is such like a specific problem that is, I feel like, easy to train and get better at. And it's one of those things that like it is inevitable in my mind that as good as they are today, or good or bad depending on your viewpoint, it's going to get a lot better in a relatively short period of time.
Even if it didn't get any better than it is today, it's going to take us a long time to ingest this and to like learn how to use
Yeah,
it
I agree
correctly.
with that.
Right? We got
Hmm.
this. It's like dropping power tools on an uncontacted Amazonian tribe. Like, we got chainsaws. What are we doing with these chainsaws? I don't know. You don't need better chainsaws. A chainsaw will keep you busy for a long time.
Yeah, so okay, if I had to summarize everything we're talking about, kind of bring it home, in terms of AI native teams, we aren't at the point that we were just talking about where we're just on the beginning and tail end and kind of AI can literally do everything in between. I mean, maybe some cases, some small case, but most of the time it's more of the human in the loop
Yeah.
cycle where you're in the beginning and the end, you're defining the requirements and the design, and at the end you're testing still, but in the middle it's still, for at least now, the most optimal AI native workflow within a team is you still have your developers going back and forth with the AI as it's going through that process, checking the code, making sure it's not a black box, that they understand it too. If they need to, because the AI can't do certain things, makes mistakes, etc., they can still jump in and guide it and whatever
Yep.
else.
I've been talking to people. I do some fractional CTO work where I just talk to friends of mine who have startups and don't have a technical leader yet. Right. So I talk to them and help them out with stuff. I know one team where they've had two junior engineers holding down the fort for the last 6 months with no senior involved. That was crazy. And they're surviving. They're not thriving, like they're not making improvements to the code base, but they're surviving because they've got a lot of cursor. I'm talking to another one who's we're going to hire these we're going to hire this team out of Czechia or hire this team out of somewhere in Eastern Europe. I'm like, you may not need to do that. So my prediction is this is going to cook off a lot of the offshoring. And if we're all going to have to get really good at product, because just being able to write a good algorithm is not special anymore. You have to know why, and you have to understand the human factors to it. And so we're all going to be product engineers.
So I've been reading a lot more about the history of Anthropic and its founders, and some of the reasons why they split off from OpenAI, and kind of like the things that they're promoting. And it's just all stuff I really, really agree with. That if you believe that AI is going to make these, has already kind of been, proven very valuable and able to do a lot of things, but will potentially even get to the point, even, it's one thing AGI or whatever, but like, forget about that term or whatever, they can gain consciousness, forget about that. But just if you can get to the point where AI is really efficient, like we're saying, at doing all development, and can basically accelerate all science and other technology, where it's just an amplifier in itself, like it can train itself and be its own engineer, manager, or whatever. Things will exponentially go even faster than they have been. And the thing is that it's very scary to think that we don't actually understand how AI makes these decisions. Like you see all the time, Google and other AI companies will tell you that, like, okay, like we've trained it of this, but then it makes this other like weird decision, and we don't actually know why. And the reason, because it's emergent, right? Like it's a neural network that they train a certain way, but nobody's ever like written lines of code within the neural network. It's just like the human brain, their pathways. It's just like we don't understand how the human brain works fully. You don't understand exactly how neural networks work. So AI safety is a series of different practices, interpretability, along with like some mitigation strategies and other things that Anthropic in particular is really heavily promoting and pushing other, people in the AI industry to start taking more seriously. And I do think that will be something that is more front of mind. The more power that these AI systems have, the more that I think the importance of AI safety and the importance of people looking into this and trying to work in this area will be.